The sun was setting on a distant, war-torn planet. The once beautiful landscape was now scarred by battles and destruction. Cities that had once flourished with life were now reduced to rubble. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of burning metal filled the atmosphere. It was a place where hope seemed to have been lost, and yet, amidst the chaos, a miracle was about to unfold. The alien queen, a figure of unmatched grace and power, stood atop the wreckage of her fallen ship. Her ship had been struck by an enemy missile, and now it lay in pieces, scattered across the desert-like terrain. Her royal guard had been killed in the explosion, and she was left alone, surrounded by enemies who sought nothing more than her capture. She was wounded, but her resilience was unmatched. She had led her people through countless struggles, but this time, it seemed the odds were against her. The enemy forces were closing in, and there was no escape. She had been betrayed, her allies scattered, and now her life hung by a thread. As she staggered across the broken ground, her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of her crown seemed to grow heavier with each step, but she refused to let it fall. She had a responsibility to her people, and she would not let them down. She had to survive, if only to bring justice to those who had wronged her and her people. But the harsh desert winds soon proved too much for her. She stumbled and fell, her vision blurring as darkness began to take over. Just as the world around her began to fade, a figure appeared in her blurry vision. It was a human soldier, dressed in simple but durable armor, appeared out of nowhere. He must have been part of the peacekeeping forces that had been deployed to the planet, though she hadn't expected to find one here. He was tall, with dark hair, and his expression was focused, yet filled with determination. His presence was a strange contrast to the barren landscape that surrounded them. The queen was not used to being helped by humans, and yet here he was, standing before her. The soldier didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees beside her, scanning her wounds quickly. Without a word, he took off his helmet, revealing a kind face, and pulled out a small medkit. He worked quickly and efficiently, dressing her wounds with an expertise that surprised her. She wanted to speak, to ask him why he was helping her, but her strength failed her, and she could barely manage a whisper. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The soldier looked at her for a moment, as if contemplating whether to answer. But instead of responding with words, he simply nodded, as though he understood that words were not necessary. He didn't speak of his mission or who he was. He simply helped her, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. With great care, he lifted her in his arms, and she felt a strange sense of comfort in his embrace, even though she barely knew him. There was something in his eyes, something that spoke of compassion and courage. He was different from the warriors she had known, different from the soldiers who fought for power and glory. This man, this human, was fighting for something else. She could feel it. He carried her through the desolate landscape, past the wreckage of her ship, and toward a hidden shelter he had found. It wasn't much, a small cave nestled into the side of a mountain, but it was safe. The queen felt herself being laid gently on the ground inside the shelter, and the soldier began to work quickly, starting a small fire and gathering supplies. For the first time in what felt like forever, the queen allowed herself to relax, closing her eyes. She had no idea who this human was or why he had saved her, but she felt a sense of gratitude and awe. Here, in this small shelter surrounded by enemies, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The soldier worked in silence, tending to her wounds and preparing food for her. His movements were precise and purposeful, each action filled with care. He didn't seem to need any recognition or thanks. He was simply doing what needed to be done. The queen couldn't help but admire his focus and determination. As the hours passed, the queen's strength slowly returned. She had been through many battles, but this moment felt different. She had been saved not by a powerful ally or a great warrior, but by a human soldier who had risked everything to save her life. It was a strange and humbling thought. She had never thought much of humans, considering them to be a lesser species compared to her own. But this human had proven her wrong. She watched him as he worked, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. There was something about him that intrigued her, something that made her question everything she had believed. Why had he chosen to help her? Why had he risked his life for someone like her, someone who had no true power left? As she pondered these questions, the human soldier looked up, sensing her gaze. For the first time, their eyes met. There was no fear, no hesitation, only understanding. The queen felt a strange connection in that moment, as if the human had seen her for who she truly was. Not just a queen, not just a leader, but a person, struggling to survive in a world that had turned its back on her. Before she could speak, the soldier stood, offering her a hand to help her to her feet. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting, allowing him to guide her up. His strength was surprising, but it was his kindness that stayed with her. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. "You'll be safe here for now," the soldier said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper, something the queen couldn't quite place. "I'll stay with you until you're ready to move on." The queen nodded, though she didn't know what to say. She had no plans for the future, no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like there might be a way forward. This human had saved her, and now she owed him more than she could ever repay. In the days that followed, the queen and the soldier stayed in the shelter. She learned more about him, though he never spoke much about himself. He was a soldier, a survivor, just like her. He had seen his fair share of war and loss, but unlike her, he had not been raised to rule a kingdom. He had chosen his path, and he was determined to make a difference in a world that often seemed hopeless. Their conversations were simple at first, but as the days passed, they grew deeper. The queen found herself drawn to him, not just for what he had done, but for who he was. There was no pretension, no desire for recognition. He was just a man who had done what he believed was right. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the queen finally spoke her thoughts aloud. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "Why risk your life for me?" The soldier looked at her, his expression calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Perhaps it was pity, perhaps understanding. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gazed into the flames as if gathering his thoughts. "I didn't save you because you're a queen," he said finally. "I saved you because you were in danger. No one should die alone in a place like this, no matter who they are. I saved you because it was the right thing to do." The queen was quiet for a long time. She had never known someone like this human. She had spent her life surrounded by power, politics, and betrayal. And yet, this man had nothing to gain by helping her. He had simply acted out of kindness. For the first time, she realized that her life had been shaped by the expectations of others. She had been born to lead, but in doing so, she had never truly lived. This human, this soldier, had shown her what it meant to be truly alive. And as the days passed, the queen began to see her world in a new light. She had been saved, not by her own strength or by the might of her people, but by the simple, unspoken courage of a human soldier. In that, she found something more powerful than any crown or title, the realization that sometimes the greatest strength lies in helping others, even when there's nothing to gain. The days that followed were a quiet and uncertain time for the queen and the human soldier. The shelter they had found nestled in the mountains became their refuge, and for the first time in a long while, the queen allowed herself to rest. The war, the betrayal, and the death of her people were distant memories in this small haven, but they still lingered in the back of her mind, like a shadow she couldn't escape. She had learned much from the soldier, whose name was Marcus. He had no great title, no kingdom to rule, yet he carried with him a strength she had not known in others. He wasn't bound by royal duty or expectations. Instead, he was driven by a simple desire to do what was right. In his quiet, determined way, He had shown her the power of compassion, and it left her questioning everything she had ever known. Marcus spent his days teaching her the skills he had learned over his years as a soldier. He showed her how to survive in the wild, how to track movements through the forest, how to fish, hunt, and build shelter from the elements. The queen, who had never had to rely on such basic skills, found herself learning with a sense of awe. Here in the wilderness, she wasn't a queen, she wasn't a symbol of power. She was just a person like Marcus, trying to survive. Their days were often spent in silence, with only the crackling of the fire to fill the space between them. They spoke occasionally, but their conversations were simple. Sometimes, Marcus would tell her stories of the places he had been, the battles he had fought, and the people he had met along the way. He spoke of his family, his memories of Earth, his home planet, and how he had been chosen to serve in the peacekeeping forces. But he rarely spoke of his past, and when he did, it was always brief, as if there were things he didn't want to share. The queen understood the unspoken distance between them. She had no intention of pressing him for details, not when she knew that her own past was filled with secrets, too many to recount. Still, she found herself drawn to him, not just for the way he had saved her, but for the way he carried himself. There was a quiet strength in his presence, a steadiness that she hadn't seen in any of her people or allies. It was something she had always craved but never found until now. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the queen couldn't help but speak her thoughts aloud. "Why did you choose this life?" she asked. "Why become a soldier? Why fight for peace when there is so much destruction?" Marcus paused for a moment, his eyes flickering to the flames before he answered. "I didn't choose this life," he said quietly. "I didn't choose to become a soldier, but I chose to keep fighting. I think deep down I always knew that peace wasn't something you could just wait for. It's something you have to work for. You have to fight for it, even if it means fighting against the odds." The queen looked at him, considering his words. She had always been taught that power was the answer to everything, that with enough power one could shape the world. But Marcus's words were a reminder that not all battles could be fought with force. Sometimes, peace required something much more difficult: sacrifice. In the following days, the queen's mind began to shift. She started to see the galaxy in a different light, a place where endless war and conflict could be avoided if only people were willing to work together. She had always believed that her kingdom's survival depended on strength, but Marcus had shown her that survival also depended on cooperation, on understanding. As the queen spent more time with Marcus, she began to realize that he was not just a soldier. He was someone who had lived through the worst the galaxy had to offer and still managed to hold on to his belief in doing what was right. He had chosen to help her, not because she was a queen or because it would benefit him, but because it was the right thing to do. That was something she had never fully understood before. But it wasn't just his actions that left an impact on her. It was the way he treated her. He didn't see her as a queen, a symbol of power, or a ruler. He saw her as a person, someone who had been hurt, who had been betrayed. He didn't worship her, nor did he fear her. He simply treated her as an equal, as a human being. And for the first time in her life, the queen felt as though she could breathe. It was this change, this shift in perspective, that led to the moment she had been avoiding for so long. The moment when she had to confront the truth of what had happened to her people. One day, as they walked along the edge of a small river, the queen stopped. The sound of the water rushing over the rocks filled the air, but it didn't drown out the pain in her heart. "I failed them," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I failed my people." Marcus turned to her, his expression serious. "You didn't fail them," he said. "You did the best you could with what you had. No one can control everything." But the queen shook her head. "I should have known. I should have seen the betrayal coming. I trusted the wrong people. And now they're all gone." The words were difficult to say and even harder to believe. The weight of her past was heavy, and it felt like it would crush her. She had spent so much time focusing on the future, on survival, that she had never allowed herself to truly mourn the loss of her people. Marcus took a step closer to her, his eyes filled with understanding. He didn't offer words of comfort. He didn't need to. Instead, he simply stood there beside her, allowing her to process her grief in her own way. "I never got the chance to say goodbye," the Queen said, her voice breaking. "I never got the chance to tell them that I loved them, that I tried to protect them." "It's not too late," Marcus replied quietly. "You're still here, you're still alive, and that means you still have the chance to do what's right." The Queen looked at him, surprised by his words. They were simple, but they carried a weight that she hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace, peace that she could never have found in the midst of a battlefield. In the days that followed, the Queen found herself growing stronger. Her grief didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. She had a new sense of purpose, one that was guided not by power or ambition, but by the desire to do what was right. She began to see a path forward, a path where she could rebuild her people, where she could work alongside others to create a better future. And though she didn't yet know how, she knew that she couldn't do it alone. One evening, as they sat under the stars, the Queen spoke again. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady now, "I need your help." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "What do you need?" "I need you to help me rebuild. I need you to help me show my people that there's more to life than war and conquest. There's something greater we can achieve together." Marcus smiled, his expression filled with warmth and respect. "I'll help you," he said simply. "I'll help you in any way I can." And in that moment, the Queen realized that she had found something far more valuable than power. She had found a true ally, someone who believed in her not because of her title, but because of who she was. As they sat together, watching the stars twinkle above, the Queen knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and obstacles to overcome. But with Marcus by her side, she felt as though anything was possible. She had been saved, not just by the actions of a single human, but by the strength of a bond formed through shared experience, mutual respect, and the desire to do what was right. Together, they would face whatever came next, united in their goal to create a future where peace could finally take root. The Queen had learned that sometimes, the most unexpected alliances could bring about the greatest changes. And with Marcus by her side, she believed that anything was possible.